It was a crisp autumn day when Barron Trump found himself walking through the busy streets of New York City. A quiet afternoon, the type where the world seemed to move in its regular rhythm, with people going about their business, shoppers, tourists, commuters, lost in their own lives. But Barron was different. Despite being the son of one of the most talked about figures in modern history, Barron had always preferred to stay out of the spotlight, maintaining a relatively low profile. Barron was used to the hustle of city life, but today felt different. He was there to do something rare, to get a sense of normalcy away from the glare of cameras and public attention. Walking alone through the streets, he was free to observe the world from a distance, watching as lives unfolded in front of him. But what he didn't expect was the sudden interruption that would change the course of his day. It happened as he was passing through a small plaza near a bustling cafe. Barron had just taken a step forward when a figure stumbled in front of him. A man, disheveled, dirty, and clearly in distress, collapsed to the ground, knocking into Barron's legs as he fell. The scene was jarring. The man, clearly homeless and struggling, lay motionless on the ground in front of Barron. People around them barely took notice, caught up in their own conversations and phones, too absorbed in their world to notice what had just transpired. Barron stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what to do. His first instinct was to walk away, to blend into the background, to keep moving and avoid the awkwardness of the situation. But as he stood there, watching the man on the ground, something within him shifted. He wasn't just the son of a former president. He was a young man, one who had learned about empathy and the importance of human connection. Barron couldn't simply ignore the man's plight, no matter how uncomfortable the situation might be. Without a second thought, he kneeled beside the man. People around him were still oblivious, passing by without even glancing down. But Barron, in that brief moment, felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. This was no ordinary day, no ordinary encounter. Something was pushing him to act, and he knew that ignoring it wasn't an option. "Hey, are you okay?" Barron asked, his voice soft yet firm. His words broke the silence, drawing the attention of a few nearby pedestrians. The man groaned slightly, his eyes fluttering open, though it was clear he was weak, struggling to stay conscious. Barron gently placed his hand on the man's shoulder, trying to offer him some comfort, some sign that he wasn't invisible in a world that had often overlooked people like him. "Stay with me, okay? Help's on the way," Barron said, his voice steady as he scanned the area for anyone who could assist. It was at that moment that a sense of realization washed over him. Barron wasn't just witnessing a tragedy, he was being given the opportunity to make a difference. Despite being thrust into a situation he hadn't anticipated, he knew that his response would define who he was, not as Barron Trump, the son of a famous figure, but as a human being with the power to make a positive impact, even in the smallest of moments. As Barron knelt by the man, the world around him seemed to slow down. The noise of the city, once a constant hum, faded into the background. In that moment, there was only the frail, struggling figure on the ground, and Barron, whose hands hovered over the man's body, unsure of what to do next. The feeling of helplessness crept in, but Barron quickly pushed it aside. His father's words about responsibility and empathy rang in his ears. This wasn't just a random encounter, it was a call to action. The man groaned again, barely lifting his head. Barron's mind raced as he quickly assessed the situation. He was surrounded by people who could help, but no one had stopped. They walked around the man, casting brief, disinterested glances before continuing on with their busy lives. Barron wasn't like them. He wasn't going to ignore the situation, no matter how difficult it seemed. He looked around, desperately searching for any sign of assistance. A woman standing nearby, talking on her phone, noticed Barron's actions. For a moment she paused, but quickly resumed her conversation. It was as if the world simply couldn't stop for one man lying in the street. Barron stood up, his mind made up. He needed to act. He couldn't just sit idly by and wait for someone else to take charge. His instinct to help was strong, and he knew that if he didn't do something, the man might be ignored entirely. He pulled out his phone and quickly dialed 911. His voice was steady but urgent as he spoke with the operator, explaining the situation. "Please, there's a man collapsed on the street. He looks like he's in trouble. Can you send someone right away?" Barron said, trying to keep his composure as he knelt back down next to the man. While waiting for help to arrive, Barron kept talking to the man. "You're going to be okay," he reassured, though he wasn't sure if the man could hear him clearly. His breathing was shallow, his body trembling slightly, but he was still alive, still hanging on. Minutes felt like hours as Barron stayed by the man's side. His heart raced as he wondered if the man would be all right. But Barron remained calm, knowing that his presence might provide a sense of comfort, even if just for a moment. Finally, the sirens of an approaching ambulance broke through the silence, signaling that help had arrived. Barron stepped back as paramedics rushed to the scene, quickly taking control of the situation. They checked the man's vitals and began administering first aid, stabilizing him as best as they could. As the paramedics worked, one of them turned to Barron. "Thank you for calling us," the paramedic said. "You did the right thing." Barron nodded, his gaze fixed on the man, who was now being carefully lifted onto a stretcher. A sense of relief washed over him, though he remained quiet, taking in the gravity of what had just transpired. As the ambulance sped off, Barron stood there for a moment, reflecting on the experience. It had started as an unexpected moment, a chance encounter on a quiet street, but it had turned into something much more. Barron hadn't just witnessed a man in need, he had taken action when no one else would. He had made a difference, not by grand gestures, but by simply being present and choosing to help. And in doing so, Barron Trump had proven that even in the most ordinary of circumstances, extraordinary acts of kindness could be found. As the days passed, Barron couldn't shake the memory of the man who had collapsed in front of him. The experience stayed with him, playing in his mind like a loop. He had acted without hesitation, doing what he believed was right in the face of a stranger's suffering. But as he thought more about it, Barron realized that the act had been about more than just a single moment. It had rippled through his life in ways he hadn't fully understood at the time. The next morning, as Barron sat at the breakfast table with his family, the story of the incident was all over the news. The media had picked up the story, and headlines were calling it a heartwarming act of kindness from Barron Trump. Barron's face appeared on the screen, showing him kneeling next to the man in need, his calm demeanor standing in stark contrast to the chaos of the situation. His parents, particularly his mother, watched the news intently. Barron could see the pride in her eyes, but also the concern. She knew how much attention moments like these could bring, especially to someone in the public eye. His father, Donald Trump, who had been mostly quiet during the conversation, finally spoke. "What you did was brave, son. I may not always agree with everything, but I'm proud of you for showing real compassion." The weight of his father's approval hit Barron differently than he expected. He had spent much of his life under the public scrutiny that came with his last name. The expectation to act in a certain way, to be a reflection of his father's larger-than-life persona, was always there. Barron realized that he had stepped out of his father's shadow in a way that mattered. He had acted based on his own sense of morality and empathy, not to please anyone or to meet any external expectations. As the week wore on, Barron received messages from people he didn't know, well-wishers, those who praised him for his actions, and even some who offered their own stories of personal struggles. Many spoke about how his simple gesture had inspired them, how it reminded them of the power of human kindness in a world that often seemed divided and self-centered. "Thank you for being there when no one else would," the letter read. "You didn't have to help me, but you did. You saved my life, and I won't forget that. You showed me there is still good in this world." Reading those words, Barron felt something shift inside of him. It wasn't just about a single action anymore. It was about the power of small acts of kindness to create a ripple effect, to inspire others to look beyond themselves and take action when it mattered most. Barron knew that the attention he had received would fade as the world's focus inevitably shifted to the next big story. But for him, the experience had left an indelible mark. He had learned something important about himself, about the impact of compassion, and about the quiet power of choosing to do the right thing when no one is watching. As he walked through life, Barron knew that this was only the beginning. The world was full of moments like the one he had experienced, and he would continue to step up, not for fame or recognition, but for the simple reason that it was the right thing to do. And maybe, just maybe, in the process, he would inspire others to do the same.